All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. Gonna do another fantasy nerd chat with my fantasy nerd friends, Tristram, aka Mask, and we have the Centrist of Mourning, aka Dusty, and I am Andrew, aka Renegade Shard Mindgasms, and we're gonna talk about Bands of Mourning, book 3 of Era 2 of Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn fantasy series. And I tried to classify all of these unusual genres together here in my title: Indiana Jones plus fantasy western meets steampunk detective story. And so, yeah, there's there's a lot to talk about with this book in particular. And I know that with us having broader knowledge of the Cosmere, we know more of the details of what's happening in the background, especially given the fact that we've all read Lost Metal too. But so yeah, we can definitely integrate what we know about the Cosmere and stuff into our conversation, but we don't need to get into the Lost Metal that much because I'm sure we'll do another dedicated chat to that. So I would say, in my reread of this book, I would say so far, especially since I read The Lost Metal for the first time only recently, I would say this book is my favorite one in Era 2, I would have to say. Because this one is so entertaining and it's really fast paced, but there's all this other world building and stuff like that, and building of the characters and relationships too. So yeah, I'd say this one is my favorite in Era 2, and I still think I like Era 1 overall slightly more than Era 2 overall, but yeah, this is my favorite one in Era 2. So what are your thoughts on this book in particular, and Era 2 versus Era 1, Tristram?
Well, I'm like a total fantasy nerd, and I love my European medieval fantasy. So I prefer Era 1 to Era 2, but it's not really because the characters are better. It's because I like the setting better. I like swords and like that kind of more medieval feeling background, which is why I think I prefer Era 1. Within Era 2, I I don't know which is my favorite book. I I would say if I could that I think different books are better for different characters. So my favorite Wayne book is book 4, The Lost Metal.
Oh yeah, for
My
sure.
favorite Steris book is definitely this one. But my favorite Marassi book is maybe controversially book 1. I love the Marassi character in book 1, and I love the way that she's developed. And again, maybe controversially, my favorite villain is Miles Hundred Lives from
Oh
the series. I love Miles. He feels so believable, and the fact that he isn't like super duper awesome, but he just can't die. And how do you deal with someone like that? I thought was such an interesting thing, and the train heist and all of that. Anyway, so it's interesting. I think it's the first book. I think is the most tightly plotted of all of them, and like my favorite Chandra book is book 2. So that's why I don't know if I can say what's my favorite book, but I think this one is the best for Steris. I think this is the best one for Steris and Wax's romantic relationship, and so I think, and this is I think the most adventure-y and the least detective-y. That's my
yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it does have the more adventure-y feel, like going on an epic quest, and it has more of those Indiana Jones vibes
Yeah,
than the other book, and less of the detective story vibes.
agreed.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
Less
yeah.
police procedural.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts in general, rather, about the book and about Era 2 versus Era 1, Dusty?
Well, the thing I like about Era 2 is that it's just so varied. From book to
Yeah.
book, you're getting a different type of story and almost a different type of genre. And as far as like progression goes, the society like quickly progresses in Era 2, like
Yeah.
ridiculously fast. Whereas in Era 1, you kind of have like this stagnation due to like the ongoing cataclysm that's going on with the with the gods dying and ruin taking over. But yeah, you see this big jump in progress. And what I like about Era 2 is that when it came to the combat writing, he had to work out some interesting things because of his limitations. Like, we didn't have Mistborn super people in the in the first any of these books, except when the Bands of Mourning were acquired for just a little bit. But as far as like, and it's funny because when I think about when he grabbed the Bands of Mourning, it's like, okay, he's like Mistborn, like super Mistborn level, maybe like Vin after she sucked in the mist level of Mistborn. But even then, like the way he wrote it, he just seemed so incredibly powerful. But just looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, we've seen something like this in the first era.
Agreed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, those are good points you brought up there in terms of the time progression in Era 2 versus Era 1. Yeah, I was thinking that too, especially like they mentioned the advance of technology and electric lighting and that kind of stuff in this book, and it makes it, to me, feel like more steampunky a little bit than some of the other books. And yeah, that's a good point too, that none of the characters are as powered up as people like Vin and Kelsier and eventually Elend in Era 1, until Wax gets the Bands of Mourning in this era. And then that's another, the Bands of Mourning themselves are another really obvious link to Era 1 also. And yeah, there's so many interesting details going on with all of this.
Just one of the things that so go, Dusty.
No, I was going to say also too, because of the focus on the characters and cast. In the first book, we had, I think, probably a lot more characters. You had the crew of thieves, Vin, Elend, and if you think about the core cast of Era 2, it's not that big. It's just you got Wax and Wayne, Marasi, Steris, and throwing a Khandra, for 2, depending on. Well, I would say or 2 because I guess the fourth book there is a little bit of Tensoon, but but it's not. It's like barely anything. But I feel like
Vendel and
I feel like the cast is smaller and focused, so that when I think about the last book in Era 2, I felt like the character development was much more deeper, and it actually, like thinking of all the characters at the end of Era 2, I felt that they had changed a bit more in a more, I would say, realistic way. But that makes sense considering the time span is a lot longer too. But I really like the resolution of a lot of the characters for Era 2. Because what we had in Era 1 was like, oh, the main good guys, basically they all died. And one of them becomes a god. In this sense, we got, one dies, and we got some interesting things that happen in the characters. Like, I don't want to get too much into the next book, but yeah, I think that
like not everyone does.
Yeah, there was a bigger focus on character development, but
yeah, that's a good point.
But the simplisticness of the story of the first one is just so gripping. So it's really hard for me to say. I feel like I could keep reading both of these like back to back and not really have a preference for either. So it's really hard for me to like determine which one is better, to be honest.
Can I ask, do you feel that having 2 eras makes the first era more enjoyable? Like, did you enjoy it even more knowing there's another era and being able to, or for you, is that irrelevant to your enjoyment?
That's a good question. I would say yes to that.
Yeah, I think Era 2 is not standalone. It needs Era 1 in order to be good. I think Era 1 doesn't need Era 2, but Era 2 definitely needs Era 1.
You see, that's really That's really
That's
interesting.
true.
Well, you see, I don't know if that is true. I think you could read Alloy of Law as a book on its own and just love it without any context. And I know some people who got into the fandom at Alloy.
Mm.
And then they're like, "Oh, this is really great." And like, "Oh, did you not know there's like an entire universe behind this guy?" And like, there is. I'm like, I just came read this because it's steampunk. I'm like, yeah, this guy does a lot
Yeah.
of stuff. And then they read
Oh, that
backwards.
reminds me. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
I
go,
want to
go.
say something about my brother's girlfriend after that.
Just one of those things. Well, on what Dustin said before, and I was interrupting him like a rude jerk. But anyway, but one of the things that he brought was the theme of progression, and
Yeah.
I know that we're not going to talk about whole groups anymore. We're going to talk about this book in a minute, but just what he said there about how in the first series it's about stagnation. That's what it's about because Ruin's been imprisoned, and actually they need Ruin to progress. And the fact that the Lord Ruler's been in charge has actually, in a way, kept them safe, but in tyranny with no choices, and hence it's completely stalled progress. So that's a really interesting way of looking at when there isn't pain and there isn't damage and there isn't test, then it halts progress. And if you, my university degree is in military history, and it's really interesting to see
Right.
how war, which is condemned, I
Oh,
think, by all of us,
man, I
provokes.
can see why you like Memories of Ice more than any other Malazan book.
Yeah, and why I like the heroes. Anyway, but the point is that if you look back historically, you can see that war and conflict provoke technological advancement, even though war is not to be commended. But then this new series, one of the things that is really cool is that Harmony says, I gave them a paradise. I gave them, if you like, an Eden. They arrived and the trees spontaneously create fruit and it's just beautiful. And so they don't choose to leave Elendil for ages. And when they do, everything still revolves around Elendil because they've just got this beautiful, perfect little world. And Harmony's like, you should have invented the radio before this. Like, what's gone wrong? And actually, it's been too kind, too protected. And so when you see some of the harsh things that Harmony has put Wax through, like we saw in this last book, one of the reasons that Wax has progressed, one of the reasons that Wax pushes progress is because he's been through such a dark time. And if you look about Marassi's had it far harder, so she's progressed far more. Look at Steris. Steris doesn't really start her character progression. She's a lovely person, but she doesn't start really progressing her character arc until, because of Wax, she has to come into contact with something that challenges the way she's been living her life. And I love that theme. And I think Sanderson's doing it on purpose. And I think in series 3, in era 3, we'll see it again. And in era 4, we'll see it again. And we'll see the challenge of what creates progress, and is progress sometimes dangerous? And actually, is danger necessary to the human experience? So I just, thematically across the series, I think that is a really good and interesting, and as a reader, I want to get my teeth into it theme. And then when Dusty said how much the characters change fundamentally, like Ham in series 1 and Doxson in series 1 are the same people at the beginning and at the end. They don't change fundamentally. Vin evolves, Elend evolves, and Sazed. The others, and Spook, but the others, they do, but very little. They're still fundamentally themselves. Even Breeze is pretty much still Breeze at the end.
Mhm.
And Straff never changes, and like Elend's noble buddies don't really change in their core character. So but in this, everyone changes. Marassi, Steris, Wayne, because it is that tighter group. Every single one of them has a fundamental change, and Wax more than any.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially by the end of book 4.
Agreed.
And yeah, and I like what you said about the broader themes that seem to be explored in both eras. And yeah, those are such common lessons and themes explored in fiction because they're so evocative of the human experience. Like,
Yep.
yeah, sometimes sometimes you need hardships to face in order to improve yourself properly. And then also sometimes progress has some dangers, and there are consequences to it, obviously, of course. And I think because Mistborn is explored in multiple different eras, it's so interesting in how the magic system is executed differently, like with all of these awesome superpowered slow motion gun battles, and like how the culture impacts how the culture changing impacts impacts society in ways that even gods like Harmony / Sazed couldn't have anticipated. And this whole theme that Brandon Sanderson has a lot in the humanity of his gods, and how they're kind of very flawed and human gods, especially because they literally used to be humans and then evolve into gods, which there are so many interesting themes like this in both eras of the series.
Agreed. Okay.
Yeah, so in terms of the plot of this book, there's a hell of a lot going on. Like, it's kind of more of a detective story at first, and talking about marriage and political stuff, and then suddenly there are all these action sequences, a whole lot of stuff. Sorry, what would you say?
The marriage stuff in the beginning is so ridiculous.
Oh, it's definitely.
They've tried to get married how many times? By the time of the beginning of the book. And then I think, wasn't Wax like complicit in the interruptions to some degree? Or was it all Wayne's?
So. It's Wayne. Okay. But we get inside Wax's head, because it's his POV we're in, and he is relieved. Like, he's going to do it because it's duty, but so there's this implication from the author that Wax has not really been trying to make this happen. He accepts it, but he hasn't been fully engaged in making it happen. And like, you can see when Wax does decide to make it happen, nothing can actually interrupt it, because he's just like, screw it, we're doing it. And actually, like, Wayne gets a lot of criticism online. Some people absolutely hate Wayne.
Yeah, I don't get that, man. I don't understand why people hate Wayne so much.
I do. It's because Wayne is not a 2023 hero, is he? Wayne is a very flawed hero.
He's like an 80s hero.
Yeah, he's flawed in the wrong ways. If he was on the A team, no one would care. But because he's being written in a book by Brandon Sanderson in 2022, 2023, people are like, oh, he has toxic views about women. Yes, he does. Like, he does have some poor views. That is a normal thing that a lot of people have. Like, that's realistic. Well, that means he can't be a hero then. Well, actually, there's people who have bad views about a lot of things, but that's not the entirety of their character. Whereas you get someone like Vegeta, if you'll allow me a Dragon Ball Z reference, who's like, let's destroy the planet. But then he's like, but also let's team up. And people are like, I'm in for this. Or people who have like huge Draco Malfoy fanboys and fangirls, like, he's a complete bully, horrible, like, narcissistic prick. But like, oh, I can't wait to see the one where he teams up with the good guys. And you're like, Wayne, from this deprived childhood, is semi-forced into a bad area, like young gang violence, I can kind of imagine it being, makes a really bad error, tries to atone, but he's still come from that background. And he doesn't have 2020 views at all. And does he need to learn and change? Yeah, over time. But actually, that doesn't make him bad. But like, no, if I'm going to like him, he has to be the politically correct guy. Otherwise, I can't be behind him. And I think that's very, very narrow, and very, very narrow views. Like, how dare he pursue a girl who isn't interested in him? Well, actually, there's a lot of guys who need to learn that lesson. That actually, look, I really fell for this girl, and she's not into me, and it takes me a while to get to grips with that. That's the fact that Wayne doesn't just immediately go, of course, Renette, I get what you're saying. It's actually very realistic.
It
Very
is.
realistic. And it deeply annoys me when I hear big fans of the series who just outright hate Wayne because he doesn't act like a mature adult of 2020 acts.
But
I
he's
find
not
that
a mature adult. He's like
he's
really
Wayne,
flawed.
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah,
That's
that
okay.
that annoys me too, man. Like but as much as I love learning about the Cosmere from those people on that 17 Shard podcast, a lot of them tend to be like that, just hating on
Yeah.
Wayne all the time. Like
They're very progressive people are going to struggle with him. But the point is, I can like a character who I wouldn't go to the pub with, right?
yeah, of course.
Yeah, like like everyone in Joe Abercrombie's novels, and I mean all of them. Like I wouldn't hang out with any of them. They
Yeah. Yeah.
but I can admire like Glockta. Hello, but I can like Glockta, but not Wayne because he's like a prat. What? No. And what Wayne actually does is, despite his flaws, what is he doing with his life? He's dedicating it to fighting crime and to trying to save people, and most of all, his buddy Wax. And many of us who are guys, well, maybe not just guys, but like one of the things that I've seen in my own like friendship group is sometimes I see my friends dating someone. I think, oh, you guys do not fit well together. And Wayne thinks that's what's happened with Wax and Steris, because they're really, really different and they didn't fit well at first. And Wax has to take that time, and Wax himself didn't think they fit. He signed a contract to marry her. Like, ooh, should I help my mate get out of this arranged marriage? That's what he's thinking. And he's just too flawed to realize Wax is committed, the situation is changing, and I'm being a jerk about this particular thing. But you know what? That's realistic too. I want Brandon to explore what happens when your best friend doesn't like your girlfriend, and how do you overcome that and deal with that. And I'm so glad he doesn't just have Wayne wake up on the second day of Steris's engagement and go, you know what? I've realized I've just been a prick, and you've been right all along, Steris.
Yeah. That'd be
I like
boring.
Well, it's not realistic. But so often
Yeah.
TV shows, I see people like, I am a villain, until like someone brings up one point, like, oh, I'm completely convinced. Now I am
Yeah.
a good guy. I want
they're
to see
like
a natural progression.
like it's good to have important or like conflicted and interesting
Yeah.
heroes and villains too. Like I was just thinking too, in terms of villains, I love watching those pitch meetings, which are like sarcastic pitches for blockbuster movies. And the so often when the guy's making fun of Marvel movies, he'll mention the villain and he'll say, so get it, this guy, his deal is he is evil. Oh, so you mean like those other villains? Yeah, but this one is evil. He's just really evil.
So what's his motivation?
Oh, he's
evil.
evil.
And Brandon tries to avoid that, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
when you look at people like Suit in book 1, or Miles 100 Lives, or when you look at Bleeder in book 2, they have absolute clear motivations, and you don't have to agree with them, but they make freaking sense.
Mhm.
And you think, I know some human beings in real world who feel this way, like people who think that the system is rigged by the rich, and think there's no point trying to work within the system because it's always to favor the well-off. And like Miles is resentful of that, right? He's like, actually, I'm better than all these rich people, and yet I don't get what's right. And Suit's argument is the opposite. Like, if you are smart enough to be rich, you deserve to rule. And if you can take advantage of stupid people, that just proves you're better than them. And like, I've seen people with that point of view, that victory goes to the clever. And even if that involves cheating and stealing, if you're not clever enough to stop me, then you deserve what's coming to you. And you think, ooh, that is dangerous point of view. And I'm so glad Wax doesn't feel that way. And that's why I root for him. I'm like, yes, Wax, you stand up to that freaking uncle. You show him. And Wax is an example of the difference. But one of the cool things at the beginning of this book is Wax is disillusioned with God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really interesting because, unlike in our world, he knows God's real. Like he
Yeah.
has chatted with him straight up, and it shows that you can still believe in a divinity and yet be disillusioned and angry. And
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting thing that Brandon can play with. That again, I think reflects human experience.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if you're actually being used as a tool by God and you don't understand the motivations, and it seems like they've wronged you in a lot of ways and they don't deserve your help, then that's totally understandable from Wax's perspective, right?
Yeah, and like, what if God is real, right? And then you're like, the age-old question. Well, why has all this crap stuff happened in my life? you must be evil to have done this to. But then we got to that theme of, do you need opposition to grow? And clearly, Harmony thinks you do. And Wax is like, you're still a pretty sadistic git to have put me through this. And but it's good. Brandon doesn't say Sazed was right. He doesn't say it. He says, this is what happened. You as the reader decide. You as the reader decide. And I love that. I'm like, yes, I'll decide with my own views. Thank you very much. I'm clever enough to decide what I think for myself. And I do like that.
Yeah. That was a very actually like very good rabbit hole that we just went down about Wayne in terms of that, I would say. Because it explains the difference between the different characters and how it's boring if Brandon Sanderson is just sort of like getting on his soapbox and giving you political speeches in his novels. Just in case you didn't notice, Wayne is sexist sometimes. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's important that you notice it.
Well, why do they not mind Wax killing a bunch of people?
Yeah, exactly.
But, Wayne, slightly sexually harasses a woman that could beat his ass
and
has
does
shot him
and shoots
him times.
But
that's the most horrendous thing in the world.
Yeah, I think exactly.
He made the character Renette strong enough to handle Wayne.
Oh, frick, right.
It's not like she's this shrinking violet that is under assault by this male. She puts him in his place really easily without much effort.
And the thing is also, he's not assaulting her either. It's not like he stalks her day and night or anything creepy like that. He's just hasn't given up being in love with her, even though there's no hope. But actually, if Shakespeare is telling that story, that also he's a tragic figure. But anyway, but again,
and he also could be married to an underage girl, and that wouldn't be a problem either.
Yeah, correct. But it would be today. Just because they would hate it today. All these people would absolutely decide.
I mean, in Shakespeare's time.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's the same point. Don't tell me what I should think. Just tell me the story, and I'll decide what I should think.
Yeah.
About Wayne, about the villains, about technology, about God, and I really like that. I really like that, and I think this story, which we should really get into, is a great adventure story. The character work is good. The plot is fun. It's just fun, and some of the the scenes are just good enough on their own. I can't wait. Even if we don't cover everything, we can't cover everything, but we have to cover the innkeeper scene where they go into the inn and starts explaining to people because
emergency plans.
That has got to be one of the best climax scenes that I've ever seen Brandon write. It is just absolutely brilliantly written, and it is just chef's kiss. I whenever I get up to the book, I'm like, that scene's coming up. I'm gonna enjoy this dialogue.
Nice.
Excited. Yeah, that's what a book should do, right? It should make you feel things, and this book does that for me.
Awesome, man. Yeah. I guess. Well, we can start wherever you guys want to start off. Did we get into the plot that much yet?
Do you want to
I
do
don't think we
plot?
really did.
Do you want to do it like plot then characters, or how do you want to break it up, Andrew?
Well, it could be either or, because one can lead into the other.
What do you want to start with?
Well, it might as well start with Wax, because we got into that
Okay.
a little bit.
All right.
Basically, I mean, to just give a really succinct description, a one-sentence description of the plot. Basically, Wax and Wayne, along with their companions, go on an epic quest to find a dead demi-God / tyrant's magic bracelets in order to defeat an evil god worshipping criminal cult.
Yep,
And
correct.
there's a bunch of setup that happens before that too, and there are all these awesome magic gun battles, and then we learn more about the details of the Cosmere a little bit, and yeah, lots of exciting stuff happens. So, and we have that marriage stuff that, oh yeah, we were talking about that a little bit, the marriage stuff at the beginning. So
Well,
yeah,
okay.
we can go back to there.
All right.
And we also discover a new society that the Lord Ruler is actually in very good light with them. So
Yeah. There's still a religious sect that are kind of worshiping him, right?
So do you want us to kind of go through it chronologically and do a bit scene by scene, or do you want to do it by character by character, or theme by theme?
We can go. It doesn't matter to me, really. I mean, I guess we can do it roughly chronologically, because if we're starting off with Wax, it's kind of makes sense to do it chronologically anyway.
So the thing in the beginning that is really cool is Wax. Like, the good thing about this book is this book absolutely builds off the second. Okay, so sometimes writers seem to forget they wrote the previous books.
Yeah.
and the character's like, let's reset. But good writers, if you can feel the previous books, and you can hear, like, Wax is still injured about what's happened with Lessie. He's still angry with God. So when he realizes that a faceless immortal, one of the Conjures, coming and saying, God needs you, he goes, no, and just walks off. And like, sometimes when people are doing the reluctant hero bit in films and stuff, they're like, oh no, I'm not going to do it. And then 5 minutes later, they're like, oh, but you're in danger. And then they do. Wax just does not. And so the Conjure does something really sensible. He doesn't just keep whining after Wax. He goes, I'll try Marassi. And that's such a cool switch, because one of the things it says is the Conjure recognize that Marassi's got the business. They realize that she is moral, that she is proactive, and that she is willing to put herself on the line for others. But most people would think, Marassi? Like, she doesn't seem to be on that level of this person who leaps through the mists at night. She isn't. But she has proven that she is not just a researcher. She is a policewoman now. She does have that knowledge of the law, but she is also actiony. She's the one who's burning around in the car. She's moved with the times better than Wax has. She's and I love that. Love that they go to her, and then by going to her, Wax comes along anyway, because there's no way he's going to let Marassi do that. And I love that. What do you think of the introduction of the new character, Milan? Because Vendel's in it, but not for very long. But Milan is a major character. How did you find Milan as a Kandra?
You go first, Dusty.
Well, Milan is kind of very close. Well, I wouldn't say she's close in personality to Wayne, but she jibes with Wayne very well. And she's not the most, she's like super blunt. and when it comes to like the religious history of things, like she just like tells it how it is. But I like her as a character. So many hilarious moments with her. I think a lot of them have to do with how, the human body and where she stores weapons and things.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is my favorite.
Making her boobs bigger, smaller, or just like taking her hair off and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I think she made an appearance in the last book. But in this book, she becomes romantically involved with Wayne.
Yeah.
And there's actually a whole scene where Wayne and Milan are like absent because they were getting busy in like the luggage compartment in the floor of a train car.
Absolutely.
While there's like all this chaos going on up above.
They don't even notice.
It's so funny.
The thing I like about it
they come in and they're like, you didn't hear these gun battles and stuff going on? Well, we were distracted. I don't know.
Varied. But the thing I love about Milan is a proper girl boss, right? Like she is more she's a better fighter, like actually like in literal combat than any of them, because she's basically indestructible. And like later on, that like basically until she's taken out, nothing can truly threaten the full party because she's so amazing. And so like when you think about sometimes the problems with girl boss characters like maybe Rey in Star Wars or something like that is everything's super easy for them and there's no reason for it. But with Milan, her very race justifies it. The hundreds of years that she's put into developing who she is explain it. And because Sanderson has put clear limitations on the Kandra, and we've explored the Kandra, especially in the last book with Bleeder, we know Kandra can be beaten. We know what damages them. We know what makes them vulnerable. And so she's incredibly powerful, awesome. You can look up to her. You can go, yeah, she could like pick up Wayne and tie him in a box. Like that's so cool that she is that. But she isn't everything. She isn't Superman. Yeah. She isn't Mistborn. And so it's a really, really cool dynamic of you start to think, well, how's the bad guys going to deal with the Kandra? All right. And also you start thinking, how is Brandon going to use the Kandra in a new and interesting way? Because he's used Kandra many times before in the first series. So just like with all his magic systems, I keep thinking, well, what's he going to do this time? And so this time he makes her into like the girl dream. She can look like whatever she wants to look like. She can be as chilled out as she wants to be. She can have casual sex if she wants to have casual sex. And she can be also freaking fighter badass, but believably with reasons in the plot, well established. And so her carefree, chilled out attitude makes complete sense. And she's full to read. And she is unrepentantly Kandra, right?
Yeah. And I like that she's I like her a lot because she's not this like cringy feminist character or anything. She's just like awesome. I don't know. I find her fascinating because she's a Kandra, just like how I found Tinsoon fascinating because I find the Kandra to be fascinating. Like she's lived hundreds of years and she can alter her appearance in all sorts of interesting ways. And she has a powerful but not like superhero powered like you were talking about. Yeah,
we just know her limitations. Like a superhero is really interesting. One of the things that makes superheroes interesting is if you understand their powers. Like if you understand that Batman doesn't just self-heal, so he needs to make sure he doesn't get shot. Well, this is how he does that. Or Superman, the influence of kryptonite or his moral code. That's the only thing that makes Superman really compelling. Anyway, but something else.
I forgot to mention in this book, she eats poop.
Of course she does. She's a carrion eater.
They all are. She went and fixed Wayne's intestines, or was it Marassi? Somebody got shot,
and she's getting rid of it all.
Yeah, and it's funny how Brandon writes it. She's like, she expels something bile out of her mouth. I was like, okay. That was like the poop from the intestines that she just cleaned out.
But that's what Kandra do, right? They're carrion eaters, and like all Kandra characters have a little bit of that. And when he plays on that, it's hilarious. And you can tell that Brandon likes a little bit of toilet humor. He puts it in enough, just slides it. But you said that she's perfect for Wayne in many ways. Well, I think that's partially because even though she's thousands of years old, she doesn't feel it, right? She acts like someone who's young and vivacious, like Wayne, right? Doesn't act his age. He's kept his youth somehow. And also like Wayne, she's up for like a slapdash, let's have fun while we're alive kind of feeling, which I think a lot of people can really resonate with. And I think one of the reasons that Wayne gels with her more than anyone else is that he and I think it's even referenced in the book, he is the most Kandra-like of all humans. Yeah. Like age can't touch him.
Well said.
He is irreverent of religion, like the Kandra are, and he is that literally becoming other people is like his thing, and a human shouldn't be able to do it, and yet Wayne's freaking good at it.
Yeah, it's funny how they comment on his ability to become other people.
Yeah.
They actually admire him a lot for that.
Yeah. And other people might see that as a character flaw. And one of the cool things about Wayne is he isn't like Shalon, right? He doesn't have a split personality in any way. But what he does is he really gets into the head of the person, usually by wearing their hat. Hi, Wayne, centrist. I love that. And I think that's actually a thing that we see in lots of cop characters in other books. Can you get into the head of the criminal? And if you can, then actually you've got a better chance of defeating him. And I think that's one of the things is that Wayne's been there and really can get into the heads of these people. And that's one of the reasons he is so successful.
Yeah, because I know what I was going to say about Milan and how her importance is in the plot, at least in the beginning. Her and the other Kandra basically are there to tell the group that, hey, there's this Kandra that lost his spike, and he had discovered something that you guys might want to look into.
Yeah. That's a very fascinating aspect of the plot.
So the main plot is actually presented by the Kandra, like their quest is presented by the Kandra. And at this point, we know the consequences of what happens when the Kandra loses like one or more of their spikes. So they're very motivated to get this Kandra whole again. But also in the last time or his notes, they saw that he came across something very interesting that is driving them forward to go look for this thing. Well, everybody wants it. Not only this group, but we have the group of the cultists, and they have split motivations as well. So they're the ones that start the quest of this book and present the quest to Wayne and crew and Wax. So I thought that's probably why they're really important to the plot, at least in presenting and driving this quest that they are to partake.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yeah, for sure. And then they get into the kind of detective story part of this for a while, where they're doing all this detective work to find out where the bands of Mourning are, and for sure that they actually do exist. And then there's once they know where to look, that starts the whole Indiana Jones part of the plot.
Right. And one thing that's really cool too about this story is that, yeah, there's this detective part, but it almost seems like it gets split up a little bit. And even then, like, even the detective parts do seem like Indiana Jones-ish.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
grave digging.
I could totally imagine, like, okay, you have this grave digging segment, and then you have the segment where Wax crashes this party and his wife gets in. Well, they're not married yet, or are they?
His fiance, because the marriage got cancelled.
Yeah,
right.
They get insulted by this person at the party, and he's just like trying to contain his rage like so hard. But even that segment where he's like asking questions seems like, okay, they're looking for an artifact, and it's kind of something I could imagine being an Indiana Jones movie as well. Even
definitely,
though detective work at the same time.
Yeah. And even like the party and the grave digging, all of that is like Indiana Jonesy stuff, right? For sure.
Yeah.
And like
definitely.
Brandon is like clearly has loved those movies and has clearly been influenced in what he's gone for. But one of the things I wanted to say, because as we're moving geographically, right? So they set up the plot. We're going to go and find this guy, this Kandra who's been damaged. He's seen this thing. Let's go find it. And as they go on a train, which is so brilliant, and that's so steampunk western. And the fight in the train is great. I love the fight.
That's the most fantasy western part. That's one of my favorite parts of the whole book for sure.
And of course, Wayne is missing from it, who's normally one of the key fighters. Milan, who is the best fighter, is missing from it. And one of the things I want to say again, going back to Dusty's point about progression, they use the first Allomantic grenade, and where
That's really cool.
that is really cool because it's a hint of what Brandon's telling us, which is, guess what? My technology is going to be allomancy advanced. It's going to have some real things like electricity and whatever you, but there's going to be some allomantic technology advancements. And we're obviously later on, we'll see that with the amulets, pendants, the pendants that they carry. But I love the allomantic grenade. I thought, hang on, because he didn't explain it. It just gets used. And when they say show, don't tell, can you imagine how much worse that would have been if we're in Elendel and they're like, oh, by the way, there's now people who can put allomantic surges into these boxes. So watch out for that. And then it happened. How much cooler just for like someone to go, what's this weird cube? Oh, crap, I've got no metals. How is that possible? Is that what it does? And then you find out it can do multiple things depending on how it's charged. And we learn really quick, right? He didn't need to sit us down and give us a lecture. And I just thought, my goodness, that's great writing. I take note, amateur writers like me, like this is how to do it. Like, because I always explain stuff. Because I'm like, oh, my world building. Let's have a world building chapter. Brandon Sanderson goes, no. My story is my world building. And like when they go through the towns, they're like having protests about Elendil being, the city being unfair with its taxes. But he doesn't give us a big political speech. It's not the Phantom Menace. Let's all stop while we explain about trade. But it is. But he just does it as an aside as the story is moving. And I just think that is an excellent example of like exposition via sword fight. Like in Game of Thrones, they said they had sex position, like they do something sexy, but also have some plot. I feel Brandon does exposition. Like as action is taking place, we learn the powers, we learn the limitations, we learn the advancements, and we get the reveals. And he just does it while stuff's going on. Even the stuff that doesn't look super actiony, like the party, where they'll just go around and talking in polite society. He mentions things like lemonade, like they've found out something new, and we get character development. He doesn't necessarily feel ready to marry Steris yet, but he's infuriated when that guy insults her. You can feel his protective instincts going, how dare you speak this way about her, you. And he wants to get his gun out and just shoot the guy. And you're like, he didn't used to feel that way in book one. In fact, in book one, he felt a little bit like Steris was a bore himself. But he's like, don't you call her a bore, you stuck-up prick. And you're like, and so Brandon doesn't go, and Wax reflected how much he had changed.
Yeah.
He just lets us realize that these emotions that he has are growing, or like a little quiet moment, a little beautiful little character moment that means nothing but means everything to me is when he finds Steris on the train and she's reading a sex book.
Oh yeah.
And she goes, no one will explain it to me. And I'm like, I get that. I get that. Like if you get someone who's a little bit like maybe because of a learning difficulty, etc., they're a little bit further academically, they're not as developed. Sometimes you can feel an instinctive flinching away from going into some of these kind of things. And, but I also remember being someone who was, I don't have any challenge. No, I'm not diagnosed with any conditions, and yet no one ever sat me down and said, "Oh, by the way, what they're hinting at when they say these words is this, and like this is probably what you should and shouldn't do." Like you just kind of figure that out. Have fun on your wedding night and figure it out. And like, so I think when it's only like, he doesn't take ages. He spends a few lines on it. But I think a lot of human beings reading that will absolutely relate to how she's feeling. A very clever woman who feels about it. But then they talk about the clips that they're missing basically 3 pennies in their ledger.
Oh, they have like a contest.
Well, at first she's like, I want to find this. He's like, how? This is so boring. And she's like, I want to. Will you do it? And he's like, okay, you've done my adventuring with me. Now I'll come do your boring thing with you. But then when it comes back to them, it skips the boring bit and it comes back to him and he's like, I found it. And basically it's shown that it is like detective work. And you start to realize that Steris and Wax have more in common than they originally thought. And maybe she's not doing it with a gun, but she does like to solve problems. And I find that's great characterization for me. Great characterization.
Yeah.
While
I was
also
going to say,
realistic.
before we get too far,
Yeah, go on.
I completely forgot that there's this pretty interesting prologue for Wax that we didn't really get into.
Yeah, I thought we were going to bring it up at the end when we talked about his sister, but no, go for it. So we see him when he's in Terrace.
Well,
That's
we get to see
actually,
young Wax and kind of like his first bump up with it's funny because young Wax kind of seems like the snitch, like the kid that you know everyone would hate because he's telling everybody, he's reporting on everybody's business. But
just so that we're clear, Dusty, I am Wax. Like I was the teacher's like more than it.
So yeah,
he's
a teacher's
Wax is
pet.
straight arrow, right?
Yeah, but
he's
there are
arrow.
some. Yeah, he's a straight arrow, but he's also somewhat of an outcast. He doesn't have any social connections to any of his peers. So, and that was made because of, his uncle didn't want him to kind of blend in with them. He kind of set him apart, and that negatively affected him in that way. But it's interesting because we get to see his detective work, like the beginning of him, like investigating something. So he sees that there's something wrong with the student, and he's reported the student to the chancellor of the school, and the chancellor's like, oh, we just need to handle it like we do over in Terrace. You don't need to involve outside authorities, because a cop came to investigate what was going on. And Wax saw this as this wasn't adequate. We need to do something about this guy now. There's something more than what we're seeing here. So he eventually follows them one night, and he figures that they've been going out and sneaking out, and there's been some arson that's been happening, and he's already been caught once, and he doesn't believe that that's going to stop. So he goes out and follows them, and he finds out that there's more than just arson that's going on. He's actually killing people, and we get to see him fight, and kind of like, oh, this is where, the crime fighting Wax was born. Was as a, and it perpetuates his character. He's the outsider, he's the loner, but he wants to make sure that justice has been done, even though he's not really wanted in society. And it's almost the same thing as soon as he gets back in book one. He comes back to society doesn't really want him, but he wants to do the right thing. So I thought that was an interesting prologue.
Wax is totally like Batman.
Except that Wax wants to do it by the rules.
True.
And in fact, that's one of the things that makes him an outcast. And as someone who was a stickler for the rules myself, I remember that not making me popular with my siblings or at school, because I do like doing what I'm told. And people say,
you're like, did you like his character in Wheel of Time?
Yeah, well, Galad is taken to the extreme on purpose. But do I have sympathy for Galad? I absolutely do. I do have a lot of sympathy for Galad. I also have some sympathy for Goyen, who a lot of people don't have sympathy for. Because actually, doing what you're told doesn't always mean that you're a mindless idiot. Sometimes But in books, it's usually shown as you are a mind, and it's only when you start breaking the rules that you become the main character.
That's true.
If you look at Hermione, for example,
sorry, go ahead.
Just Hermione Granger is a good example. Hermione's shown as a rule keeper, but then immediately in the first book, when she starts breaking rules, that's when she is allowed to be a main character.
True.
And Harry Potter breaks rules constantly and is held up as the idol of the school, and his father before him. And like, I was a rule keeper, so I really sympathize with rule keepers, and I love it that occasionally someone gets to be a rule keeper. And even Wax doesn't be a rule keeper all the time. He's on the edge, isn't he? But he gets a dispensation from the constabulary, and so he can do both. But like Dusty said, his rule keeping makes people think you don't get it, you're boring, you're too down the line, and he can never be rule keeper enough for the people like, yeah, but you're not pure Terrace. So he can't win. But I love his investigative work. I love how he wants to listen to people and is prepared to give people a chance who others won't. Like his grandmother ignores the detective. Wax listens to him and goes, actually, he's got a point. But he still likes a lot of the Terrace things and thinks they've got a point. He doesn't dismiss them either. I love that this establishes that Idashwi, the person who we know went and got replaced by Bleeder in book 2, was one of these rebels. Makes complete sense that's why she went to live amongst the non-Terrace and got obviously killed by Bleeder. It establishes that Wax's sister is a lot more risky than he is and saw him as like a bit of an annoying tag-along. So that's important because we're going to meet her at some point. And finally, one other thing I think it does is when he fights Forge at the end, they show that Wax, which is something we've had hinted at all through the books, is that Wax isn't just a coin shot. He's a super good coin shot, right? Like he can do his bubble. Other people haven't experimented with their powers like he has. And it's, again, because he's been put up against these difficult situations, he's used his powers more and he's figured out how to do more with them than a typical coin shot. And so I don't know if you remember the climax. Him and Forge are both pushing the bullet and it's stuck between them, which is a classic coin shot issue. And then he's like, hang on a minute. This isn't just a piece of metal. It's a bullet. So he lets go of the other bits and operates like a hammer, hits the end and shoots the bullet. And that's how he wins the fight. And like, oh, so he actually is able to get his power to see the bullet as separate from the casing and actually use his power to trigger it. That is such a cool thing, and it's so Brandon Sanderson, right? Doesn't change the power, uses it in a clever way, and that's why he doesn't just like if it was Dragon Ball Z, what he'd do is he'd dig deep.
Get really strong.
But he dig deep, like
power up for 3 episodes,
or he'd just be resolved. That happens a lot, doesn't it? Like the hero's all beaten down and he just pulls on a deeper well of willpower and then goes and then wins. But he doesn't do that. He does something specific that the reader can understand, so it makes Forge's defeat more satisfying. And that theme, by the way, of him being super good with his powers, we see expanded on further in book 4. And when Wayne does it, people call BS. Right? Wayne starts to use his power more effectively because he's used it so throughout time and does some similar things to how Wax uses his power. And people, oh, Wayne's great. I'm like, you have no problem. Wax has been doing this since book 1. What are you talking about? Like, that's the whole thing. And last thought, maybe the fact that they only have 1 elementic power and 1 ferrochemical power means they've used just that one so much more. That's why they've become so excellent with it. Anyway,
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. So, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Dusty. Great prologue. It's a freaking great prologue.
Yeah, I totally had forgotten about that. Yeah, that's so important, though.
It is that we don't see savants.
Well, don't you think he kind of is a bit savanty?
In the way of being clever, but
no, that he's used it so much.
Yeah.
That it's almost become a part of him. I mean that way.
Right.
But yeah, you're right.
Dusty, do you mean like a savant in terms of their natural ability just being so much higher?
No,
I'm talking about the era 1 where you push on your power so much you become a savant.
Oh, okay.
But you remember what Spook did, and he was pushing on his tin so hard that he had to keep a blindfold on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
And you
I
can
forgot
do it
about
with
that.
you can do it with pewter, but if you do it with pewter, then you have to just keep having pewter, otherwise you die. Like
Right.
you become reliant. It's very similar to the idea of an overuse of like steroids. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But I think, Dusty, that like that Wayne and Wax are meant to be like bordering on, like, they've, because of their jobs, they've used it so much that it has affected them. That I think he's hinting at that, but you're right, it's not the same. It's not the same level as what we saw in Era 1 with true savants who'd gone beyond what is healthy. Yeah, I guess I can't think of anyone who's really like a spook type in Era 2. You're right. I wonder if we'll see that in Era 3.
Yeah.
I think maybe
And-
because Era 1 is so dire
Yeah.
that, you know, they don't care much about their own self-preservation. So
I saw what you did there. So they don't care enough about their self-preservation. So do they ruin themselves, Dusty? Do they ruin themselves?
They can't find the harmony between the ruin and the preservation.
Oh, beautiful. French. Chef's kiss. So, can I just touch on the innkeeper scene before we go into the rest of the real plot, because this is to do with the plot. So my favorite scene in the whole book is the innkeeper scene. They arrive at one of the towns and they go to the inn, and it's just like a group of D&D characters walk in, and like Wayne just starts smashing windows open so that they can jump out without trouble, and the innkeeper's going, "What are you doing?" And Wax is like, "Don't worry, we'll pay for that." Because and you know, D&D characters always have tons of gold compared to what normal people have, and would totally just say, "I buy the inn," and then Steris is going up to her going, I'm sorry about them. Now, just to prepare you for the things that might happen. So, explosions. We make it. And she goes down the list. And eventually she comes up to one like falsely accused. And like that's something that actually happens to them while they're there. And she's a little smug when they get falsely arrested. She's like, "Oh, I thought that would happen. It was number 7 on my list." And then all these crackpot stuff, and they're talking about explosions and death and what they'll pay her for if things go wrong. And it's meant to be reassuring. And it's so not reassuring. And then Marassi comes in, and it's so good by Brandon, because Marassi comes in, you think he's going to have Marassi play the straight man and go, "Look, I understand that they're all a bit crazy, but trust me, they're not really." And, and she drops a line about going grave digging. And I was just like, he tricked me. Like, I didn't think that. I thought, like, even though I know the characters, so I'm laughing along as the reader going, "Yeah, this poor innkeeper, she doesn't know what's really going on. I know what's really going on." But then Marassi, I think she's going to be like the one who's like, "Oh yeah, they're all crazy, but don't worry." Like they're and Milan is like, "I need to bring in more of my skulls." In like her baggage, and it's just so freaking hilarious. And I just think that and then later on when they're framed for murder, and like Asteris is just so self-satisfied, she's like, "See, I told you, framed for murder, it was on my list." As if this poor woman's gonna be happy about it. And the thing is, Steris is taking herself completely seriously. Wayne's taking himself completely seriously. Milan is just mentioning skulls because that's what she has to bring. Like, none of them are deliberately playing this poor woman. And I just, oh my goodness, I can reread that scene. And I laugh and laugh every time. I read my Kindle in my bed next to my wife who's going to sleep, and I remember her saying, "Shut up," because I'm laughing and she's trying to go to sleep. I remember when I first read Bands of Mourning, I remember just giggling to myself at 12:30 at night, and she's like, "Shut up, like, stop laughing." It's like, because it was just, I laughed out loud reading it. This guy just absolutely loved that. And like, Brandon books I'm an emotional guy, so Brandon books have made me grit my teeth. They've made me go, "Frick yeah!" And they've made me cry, and they've made me gasp, and they've also just made me laugh out loud. And that's one of those scenes. And is it really plot relevant? Not really, but it's character relevant. And it's absolutely got great comedic value.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That relates to how there is more character development in the characters in Era 2 than there is in Book 1.
Yeah.
And
I think so.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting too, if you think about Era 2, it almost feels that Era 1 had very little room for comedy because it was kind of this super dire situation.
Post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, so I think that lighthearted moment, it does give some variance to Era 2, which I thought was funny as well. I was remembering that scene again. I was like, this is so ridiculous. Like, what are these people doing? And it's funny because Steris is like supposed to be like the straight one, and she's like explaining like the possibilities, and the possibilities just seem utterly like ridiculous. It's like, you're preparing for all this, and then I'm the innkeeper worrying about how my inn is possibly going to blow up and not exist anymore. But they said they're going to pay for it, so we'll see.
I love it, and again, just one of the things, like I didn't pick up on that the way you did, Dusty, but what you said there is spot on. Like in Era 1, they're always like literally one discovery away from death. Like when they're being the crew, if they get found, if someone gets through the copper cloud and realizes where they are, like they can just all be killed. Like it's never a doubt. Like if the Steel Inquisitors turn up and find them, it's like agents in the Matrix. They're dead. They cannot win. Even Kelsier, who is the greatest of them, basically has to run from Inquisitors. He can fight them, kinda, but pretty much has to run. And when he fully takes them on, he dies. I mean, he's amazing.
Yeah, he's kind of like the Morpheus of the Matrix of in terms of Era 1 in that way.
100%. And
because Vin is like Neo.
She is Neo, and she's the one who eventually can go beyond because she, like the mists and stuff. But that's not what we're here for. But I guess that's one of the things I'm thinking. Just is in Era 2, they're not like that, right? They're people living ordinary lives, and if they don't go on these adventures, they'll still live good, happy lives. You know, they're not living in an awful dictatorship that is out to destroy them, and so their motivations have to be different. Like in Era 1, it's like our own survival, and like the freedom and survival of the Ska is necessary on revolution, or like stopping ruin. In Era 2, it's not like that, is it? They have to be motivated to step out of their comfort zone and do something different, because actually they're quite comfortable. He has quite a nice life. He's well off, and so do Marasi and Steris, really. So that's really interesting. Did we mention that at the party, Wayne pretends to be a scientist? If we mentioned that?
Oh yeah,
we didn't mention he does a good job at it.
He does a good job. Just one thing about that I want to bring up is that he pretends to be a scientist, and like the way he fakes it is delightful. Great use of speed bubbles, a great way of making Marasi still important. But one of the cool things is he is unexpectedly confronted by someone who knows his persona and is outraged because he stole ideas that her dad came up with first. And or actually, this might have been in the second book. Sorry.
No, I think did that happen? I think something maybe like that happens.
The only thing I want to say is that when it does happen, one of the things that's cool is that at the end, like he gets out of it, but he actually goes and says to the girl, "Do you want some funding?" And that is just, when that happened, I just want to say, like, he didn't do it because he thought it was a good idea. He did it because he's like, oh, I feel a bit guilty. So I've got loads of money. I don't do anything with it. But as soon as he said that, I thought, Wayne's going to be freaking rich. And I totally...
Oh, he's already rich.
But he wasn't necessarily really
Yeah, but
rich.
we don't know that until book 4, though.
And
well, we don't know how rich he is until the next book.
But he doesn't become really rich until he invests in her, because what he invests in is basically home electricity. Oh my word! Great choice to invest in, Wayne, and like the way that just I'm just saying that as soon as it happened, I said, I know what is going to happen. And I know that Wayne hasn't done it to be clever, but it's going to massively turn out to the good because I know what happens in our own world. And I just thought, like, that didn't take very long, a couple of seconds, but really cool little bit of characterization, ways you can get in trouble when disguised. And then it also shows some about Wayne's personality, that he's like, this girl's been screwed over, so's her dad. Let's see if I can help out with my little bit of money that I've got, because I've got more money than I need. Money has almost no value to Wayne. Like, he doesn't care about money. And which is actually supposedly a really admirable trait that almost no one ever seems to mention in his praise, is that he is utterly, utterly uninterested in money. Like, it doesn't impress him. He isn't desperate to get it. He won't. And I believe, this bit's me personally, I believe that's partially because he robbed that man for money when he shot him. And it made Wayne think, I don't want to ever be like this. I don't want to use guns, and I don't want to hurt people for money. And so he never has since. And again, it's very black and white with Wayne. He's got a kind of almost childish approach. But man, I can get behind that as a reaction to, I made a huge screw up and desperately trying to put it right. That's how I see Wayne, as someone who is desperately trying to put it right his whole life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, he spends his life trying to make up for his past mistakes, and he never really gets forgiven for it while he's still I won't say any more than that. I was about to spoil the ending of book 4.
But he also he accepts that he doesn't, that it doesn't earn him out. Like, he's not saying you have to forgive me. He's just saying that to do my bit, will do everything I can, even though I know it won't be enough, but that shouldn't mean I don't try. Imagine if some killers were just like, what am I going to do? Bring him back to life? I can't, so I might as well just double down and kill a bunch more people. Well, no, you should be regretful and do what you can, even though you can't actually ever undo what you've done. You can still change. And Brandon's theme in all books is change, right? Look at Kaladin, look at Tress, any of these characters. It's about change. Yep. And
well said.
Wayne is the biggest changer of all. I mean, he literally changes with his hat. So yeah, I love that foreshadowing. Very clever. Good job on you, Sanderson. You should probably make money writing books.
He does.
Graveyard scene. What did you like the graveyard?
That's a very good scene. Yeah.
Why? Why do you like it?
I like the use of the speed bubbles and the exposition through dialogue and learning a little bit more about Wayne, and I forget some of the other reasons, but yeah, I thought it was a good scene. Why did you think it was a good scene?
Well, again, very similar to you. Like, one of the things that's cool about the train fight and the graveyard fight is the background, right? The fact it's on a train is what makes it this linear battle, that goes down the train and the cars. The thing about the graveyard scene is the dimensions of a grave, right, are so interesting. And the idea of using grenades, because actually shooting someone in a grave is really tough. So they have to lob something in. And the speed bubble use, because it's such a small enclosed area. But of course, they can have this full chat while no one else can see them. And the ability to plan and then do something that wouldn't work, but can work in this environment because they get to think it all through. So often in the movie, you're like, how did they come up with all that at the last minute? But Wayne has an absolute excuse why he can, and built into the plot. And I'm like, oh, I love that. I also love that Marassi isn't just a passenger in it. But nor does she become just super boss and then like rolls out of the grave, pulls out 2 revolvers, goes taking down 8 guys as she vaults to the side, picks Wayne up and hurls him at them as a human javelin. They don't make that mistake. But Marassi is used for her intelligence. She's a good shot. She's got nerves of steel. But Wayne's still allowed to be the more useful person, because in that environment he would be. And one of the most useful things Wayne does is he knows straight away that the guy's going to con them. It's like, yeah, he's gone off to get his mates. Like, what? How do you even know that? He's like, oh, it's clear. Like, he's definitely in on it. And like, wow, Wayne,
Yeah.
you dark horse. So yeah, I love that scene, but I especially love the claustrophobia of it and the way that shows the power of speed bubbles in limited areas.
Definitely.
Yep.
So, Dusty, what do you think about that scene, and also what do you think about that train scene?
Yeah.
Well, I really liked the train scene. I thought they did really well by limiting, taking the Conjure out, taking Wayne out. So it did really seem like they had met their match and they were at their wits' end. There was so much going on. People getting tossed off trains, like a big old hulking dude that Wax was having a lot of trouble with. And when the hulking dude gets introduced, he gets introduced with the allomantic grenade. So we're like,
Yeah.
oh, what's going on with this big dude? And then we see this box, and then my powers go away, and this guy's also a leecher. So what's going on here? But yeah, I really liked the train scene. The graveyard scene was really tense because they're like trapped in this small little area, and they have to figure out what they're gonna do because they are very limited in choice. And it was really interesting that they're able to slow things down, calm it down a little bit, and come up with a plan that works really well. But yeah, those two scenes I thought were really cool.
Definitely. So let's talk about basically like their investigations into the bands of mourning and then how they get into their epic. Well, you mentioned that the Kandra Marasi is the one who ends up sending them on the quest for the bands of mourning. So we can talk about that, and also the quest itself, which I think is really awesome, and it's another one of my favorite parts of the book.
So yeah, let's do that.
What does it lead to? It leads them to a new character that we get introduced to us, which expands Skadrial quite a bit,
hugely,
like a lot. It also progresses the potential of the allomantic technology that we see. It paints another character that we hated from the first series in a different light. It also gives us, how is this guy still alive and traveling and teaching these other groups of people? Like, what does this imply with other things that could be happening?
Yeah.
So, like, there's a lot of mysteries that get thrown in there. There's a new character. We get to see this crazy technology that we haven't seen. And we see how evil, like utterly evil, like
Setar.
so they took a lot of his comrades and just
I find that
tortured them to death.
I find that the aspect of the set even more interesting, given the fact that I've read book 4 too, because I know that it connects to like even broader Cosmere elements.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, introducing the idea of so they go to the dig site, and they so we see a couple of key things as you point out. But one of the things is obviously the introduction of the idea of an airship.
Yeah.
So that is a game changer.
That's like super steampunky part of it too, which is awesome.
It is, but one of the things about the airship is we find out that the airship relies on eventually on allomantic technology, that the technology is allomancer based, and secondly that then says that not only coin shots can fly. That's the thing. Like the air has always been the coin shots world, and now there is a way for non-coin shots to be in that place. The other thing is the military implications. So wars have been fought on land. The train was the quickest way to get anywhere, and now there's this new implication of what can be done, and so you can go now.
Oh, hello.
My daughter is just here, so I might dismiss her. But
okay.
But just military implications, trade implications, and then of course the finding of Alec. And I think it's really cool because technically the Southern Skadrians are just humans too, but they really put across that sort of concept of meeting a different race, right? Literally. Yeah, we're humans, but we're from different cultures. we look different, and we like they really think almost at first that he's almost a bit of a savage, and he thinks that of them, that they're a bit of a savage because they're technologically way behind him. But when someone can't speak your language and doesn't seem to understand about allomancers and almost worships you, that has a lot of connotations of what people found when the British started exploring islands and met people, and they were like, "What? You can do this? Are you a god?" And like,
Good point.
like that's really tricky because that could have gone very wrong for Brandon. Yeah, because you got to be careful with that kind of story. But I think he did well enough in showing that the Southern Skadrians are advanced way better in some ways, and I think that helped avoid the whole savages, barely even human
Right.
conflict that people might have had. Well, people will argue about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And but I think
that's a good point too, because the way that it's related to the way he portrays Wayne too, in that he just presents it as if, okay, this is happening, but it's not something I'm endorsing necessarily. This is something that's happening, these cultural differences and struggles between these two different races of people.
Now, one thing that's interesting about Alec and his people is that they have a slightly different physiology. They cannot survive in particular climates that those other Skadrians can. Like they were going into a colder environment, and it was death for Alec, and for the others, it's like, this isn't so bad. But Alec's body couldn't handle it without allomantic technology.
Yeah. It's like, I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to die. And but if you think about that, that can happen in our own, not with like different races, but that can happen in our own world with, like, for example, someone who is frail and someone who is young and healthy. You both go into the Arctic, one of you is going to last a lot longer than the other, and so Brandon's saying their bodies are intrinsically changed, but not in the same way as like one's an elf and one's a dwarf. But a significant intrinsic difference for sure. But that's interesting, right? That just adds to the level of interest. What do you think about the way he chose to use masks as part of their culture?
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. I like that.
I thought that probably increased like the whole savage thing, just thinking about it. Like when I think about when the first encounter of, they definitely played up the savage. It's like, oh, this hairy beast with like a mask on. So we're like, oh, what is this thing? And then it speaks in a very polite and reverent way to them. It speaks to Wax like he's a deity.
God, yeah.
But we then get to learn what the masks are and what. And kind of reminded me of like a Japanese kind of society where like you kind of have a conformity, and politeness and decorum is like really important when you're interacting with other people. And it's funny because we get to see later on when he finds his comrades that they see him acting a little less like what he should be, because he's going freely without the mask and talking to these others, and they his comrades that they eventually rescue find that a bit disrespectful that he's speaking to people without his mask on. And at a point he gives his mask away. The mask he gives away is much more fancier, but he just replaces it with another plain old mask.
Yeah, but it's still a message, isn't it? It's still like a profound thing. I think so.
Well, I thought it too.
For sure.
It was definitely like a gesture that sounded like does not happen in their society. That they just don't give masks away in that fashion. So I thought it was a really interesting culture that he built with that character. And the way in the audiobook, I think he talks kind of like Swedish. He sounds very Swedish to me. But I thought the character was really interesting.
That's cool.
You should check out the audiobook sometimes.
I should. It sounds cool. But Alec is a really cool character, and one of the things I really like about Alec is he is an airman, but he is not some big boss guy either. Like he's got like some skills that he has, like he knows about how to use the technology of his land, but he is not like some awesome fighter or anything. He's just showing that for them, these ships take a load of people to make work, right? And he's like one of the guys who's down in engineering. Like that's like what he is. And I love that, and I absolutely love what they do with Alec in book 4 as well. That he is just a regular guy, but he's a nice guy. He has knowledge and he wants the best, and he's been put into an awful hostage situation and has managed to not lose his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And like he's actually more forthcoming than almost any of his friends, like he said. And like they all think, my goodness, this guy's super stiff, and he's actually the most chilled out of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that like juxtapositioning of expectations. Like, oh, this guy's like super stiff and into his masks and stuff. Like, actually, he's the least bothered about that of everyone in his culture. You're like, oh, cool, excellent, I love it. And I love that like when he is rescued, he's so appreciative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
and him being rescued, I don't think emasculates his character either. Like some people are like, you can't have people being rescued because that just means they're pointless. And I'm like, no, like we all need rescuing at some point in our lives.
Yeah.
You know, even maybe not from crime or death, but like I've been at some dances where I needed rescuing. And the thing is, you can rescue someone socially, emotionally, physically, in so many ways. And so I hope that the idea of the trope of rescue doesn't always mean that the person in need of rescue is useless or helpless or just a waste of character space. And I think, again, Brandon, by making it someone who has a clear purpose in the plot, who can do stuff for himself, but it's completely understandable about why he's in the desperate situation he is in. And he is emotionally traumatized by what's happened. And when he finds out that the others are dead, like he is gutted, he weeps. And you're like, yes, so would I. Like, and so the author helps me through this character to sympathize with these masked people who I don't even really know how human they are yet, but I feel an immediate connection with them through Alec. And so I thought they were all going to be portrayed as like, oh, we need to help these people. But actually, Brandon pretty quickly shows you that the Malwish aren't to be messed with, and that they have their own group of badasses who, you know, in every race, in every culture, you're going to find people who don't get along and who are like, hey, this is ours, hands off our stuff. And you see Wax having to be pretty tough with the Malwish as well at the end. Like, so I thought that was a really interesting dynamic. But of course, one of the things is we now know that one of the people, it's not only about the jewel anymore. Now we know that Rat's sister is captive, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
And so Wax is like, my sister is alive. What the crap? And the reason I've not known about her is my evil uncle is holding her prisoner. Oh, I'm rescuing her for sure. And that storyline is interesting.
Yeah. Turns out she doesn't exactly want to be rescued.
Well, but he does rescue her, right? They turn up and save her. And they think they've got Soup, but it's just a radio. And then, of course, they have to do the proper Indiana Jones stuff, right? And Telsin goes with them. She's one of the team.
Yep.
And you know, one thing that's interesting about Telsin is she doesn't seem to be an absolute damsel in distress. Once she gets a gun, she immediately kills one of her captors. Like, oh, she's been traumatized, but she's a badass. Okay. And we saw Telsin in the prologue, bit of a rebel, maybe not too intimidated. Okay, that makes sense. And so everything seems to be going fine. And then, of course, it's a race to the summit to find the Lord Ruler's superpowered MacGuffin.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
The most Indiana Jones of Indiana Jones moments.
Definitely. We have to go through this secret temple and look out for these traps, okay?
What did you enjoy about this bit, Dusty?
I thought it was interesting that they used Milan as trap fodder.
Yeah. That was funny.
By the way, if you're a D&D guy, if any of you play D&D, that's often what they say in D&D. There's a rogue class who are trap finders, and like, if you don't have a rogue, send in the person with the most hit points.
Yeah, so
Because then when it blows up, they don't die. And so Milan's just like, yep, chuck her in. And sometimes we see Wayne used that way. Like, chuck Wayne in. If he gets bullets in him, he'll live. Like, that is so freaking harsh. Oh, brilliant. I love it. I love it.
yeah, so they set up all these traps, and then they notice that the other group arrives, but they get tricked.
Yeah.
They use like perspective to trick them. They're like, oh, they're off in the distance. We don't have to worry about them just yet. But it's like, nope. They were just holding these people here so that it looked like we weren't that close. So they ended up springing the trap, and then they try to turn it on them. And they're kind of at a standstill anyway, because Wax can't get in.
Yep.
And they're like, Suit's all, well, let's work together. And open this thing up.
And he lets them take him prisoner, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
He says, oh, I'll come with you as your prisoner. Like, oh,
that's not like, suspicious at all.
Yeah, because like you'd think that Suit would be worried about his like safety, because he's not like some badass gunslinger. Huh? Like, what's going on here?
Or is he? Or is he?
Yeah. Well, at this point, I just want to say, I want to admit, I did not know what was going to happen. Like,
I didn't either.
Brandon completely tricked me. I'm not gonna say I saw it coming, because I did not. I didn't see the hemalurgy thing coming, and I didn't see the betrayal. I didn't realize who was going to be the traitor. I didn't realize it was going to be a traitor. Yeah. So I also didn't realize where the Bands of Mourning was either.
Me neither. I don't think any of us.
Like I'm totally okay with Brandon doing it. I'm just saying I didn't outthink him. He outthought me. I realized the betrayal was going to happen, I think maybe 4 sentences before she outright does it. So that is okay. That is not that, and that's only because suddenly things start going wrong, and you're like, oh yeah. But did any of you think that Wax was going to be left to die?
No, I didn't.
No, the thing that shocked me most about Wax was they left it as if he killed somebody with the gun. Because
Wayne.
I'm saying Wayne.
I thought he did.
I thought he died too, because he met. I was like, if Wayne broke his vow of not using guns, there has to be like a truly valid reason for him to do something.
Yeah,
but there was. That's why I believed it.
He actually died. He did. Like, Wax technically died.
Yeah. And like that's the thing, is that Wayne.
Yeah, and God basically said, "It's not your time. I need to use you."
But like that is such an amazing thing. So like they go through all these traps. It's quite clever. It is Indiana Jonesy, but doing so breaks Milan and makes her less and less and less effective. Mm-hmm. Plus, they've brought a solution for her as well, haven't they? With the syringes that were actually brought to deal with bad Chandra, or Chandra who might be traumatized. Mm-hmm. So they had this system to like sort it out. And of course, we knew they had that with them the whole time. Mm-hmm. And then of course it's used on Milan. I'm like, oh, of course, Brandon. Well done with your Chekhov's gun there, your Chekhov's syringe. But then the betrayal, when it occurs, is so gut wrenching, because you think, poor freaking Wax, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing he has can be nice. His uncle comes back from the dead and is the villain. His sister goes back and she's the villain too. And all the people who don't come back from the dead are your nice family, because they're actually dead. Sucks to be you, Wax. And by the way, your girlfriend who comes back from the dead was never really your girlfriend. She was sent to you as a puppet to manipulate you, and now you have to kill her again.
Yeah.
Wax. The guy is broken. But then, literally, he is killed by his sister, right? Like, just straight up killed. Like, she is cold, and she wins, or she thinks she does. She has taken out the enemy. Her and Suit are victorious. We discover that they are using allomantic abilities, or at least seem to have some allomantic ability because suit coin shots. And then so Milan's completely out. What's Marassi going to do now? She can't fight them. Wax, who's the other big gun, is down, and so it's just like, oh, it's over, and it seems like it really is, and so interesting. But obviously, they haven't found the real bands, and you think that that Wax is dead. They think they've dealt with Marassi, and so the trauma that Wayne goes to there, and I think it's a great look at Wayne's character, because like I said, Wayne's turned his back on guns, turned his back on like being a criminal, and expected Wax to hang him when Wax caught him. Yeah, he was just crying, wasn't he? Like Wax finds him, this little teenage boy who's thinking he's going to be a gunslinger, as well as he isn't, and he finds him curled up, ready to die. Miles would have hung him or shot him.
Yeah.
And Wax rehabilitates him and takes him under his wing. And it's clear that Wayne causes Wax all sorts of trouble through life. But Wax just believes in trying to do his best to save this kid. And really is like not only a friend to Wayne, but in a way is like a father, or at least a big brother, like a mentor and a role model. And now this one person left in Wayne's life, this one person who he's done everything to be like and to respect, is killed by someone who should have been his greatest ally, his own family. And Wayne's just like, nope, nope. My brain cannot accept this.
Yep.
And so all his rules come down. And I think, I don't know, maybe there is that thing that Wayne kind of maybe knew in his head that he wasn't killing her, but I think he would have just killed her. Like, I think all the rules were gone. And when you talk to people who've been in the military, and I've had this experience once, talking to someone who's done some time and actually been on the end of a gun and killed somebody. And he said, it is strange. He's like, your mind does not work the same when you think you might die, you are the other guy. And when you think he might shoot your buddies. And the man who spoke to me said, when I was out there, I turned off a little bit of myself. And he said it was my team, and then it was everybody else. And he's like, I'm not justifying it. I didn't ask him to justify it, but he's just saying, I have killed people now. I've done it according to the rules of engagement. I've done it to save my buddies and my team, but I've pulled triggers and I've seen a human being go down and not get back up. And like, I wanted to talk to him about it because I wanted to try and understand it. But I got to say, he did not want to talk about it very much. He talked to me about it for like half an hour, and then he was like, I'm done with this conversation. And I obviously realized he was done with that conversation, and I haven't brought it up again because it was an uncomfortable conversation. But it was interesting for him to say that to me, because he's like an ordinary guy. You meet him, you can't tell. He doesn't look ex-military. He doesn't have like tattoos down his arm with his brand number or whatever you're supposed to look like. But yeah, it really made me think. And I think that's what happens to Wayne here. I think he has a mental break, and all the rules are out for a second while he does what his gut reaction is, which is this person needs to freaking die.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it needs to be justified. I'm not saying it's right. Like, I don't think Brandon's saying necessarily it's right or wrong. He's just saying that's what Wayne would do, and it's what Wayne did. And you can decide what you think about that.
I mean, I think it's totally understandable given the circumstances of the situation and Wayne's character and how devoted he was to Wax, that if he's gone, like, why should I do this thing? Because he's the inspiration for him being a better person in a lot of ways. So if she's going to take away my inspiration for being a better person and like a guy who's like a brother to me, basically, then I'm going to violate my own rule and she needs to die. That totally makes sense.
And it wasn't like 5 weeks later, right? It was in the time of trauma. He's like, F you.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, you can't use guns. Oh, I just freaking did. And that's what makes it so, because he doesn't do anything spectacular. He doesn't do like a triple backflip over her neck, snaps her neck and saves the day. It's just like he gets a gun and pulls the trigger. at practically point blank range. But wow, was it impactful? I'm like, did Wayne just use a gun? And when he did that, I thought, Brandon, you've been waiting for this. You knew as soon as you told us that Wayne doesn't shoot guns, you knew at one point you were going to have Wayne shoot a gun.
Yeah.
You were, and
Man,
yeah.
I just thought of this. This is like Wayne's Die Hard moment.
It is
just like Al in the first Die Hard movie when he finally shoots a gun again to save Bruce Willis's life and his wife's life too.
And even though we've seen people that entire movie run around with machine guns, blowing all sorts of crap up, that's the most impactful shot of the entire thing.
For sure, yeah.
And that character, by the way, that cop, is the most likable character, including John McClane and his wife, in the entire show.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Like, I don't know anyone who doesn't like that cop. Like, he is just like
he's more likable than John McClane because he's not like an asshole sometimes.
He isn't. He's had a rough time. Hard things have happened to him, and he's trying his best to freaking do something about it. You're like, wow, I can totally respect the hell out of you for your choices. Even the fact that you can't pull a gun and that you haven't been able to get promoted because of the decisions that you've made. But my goodness, to be able in that moment of truth to be able to overcome your inner demons, I'm like, yes, that's one of the reasons that's an awesome movie. But anyway, but what I'm saying is Brandon Sanderson has pulled on those same storytelling skills with Wayne here.
Definitely. So, Dusty, I think you need to go pretty much right away, right?
Well, I can switch to cell phone status, which means I'm going to be on my phone. So I'm going to be off camera, but I'll jump back in the room and I'll be on Bluetooth. I'll still be able to speak and everything.
Well, and we won't take forever, Dusty. We won't take forever, but that's cool. So what about you, Andrew? What do you like about this climax the best? Like, what are the bits that you really loved?
I mean, definitely like them finding the bands of Mourning and multiple characters using them, and Wax dying and then talking with God in the form of Harmony / Sazed, and then Sazed bringing him back to life because he's going to use him as like a Jesus / weapon, basically. I think all that stuff was really cool.
Yeah, less as a savior, more as like a freaking badass like assassin. But
more of a weapon for sure.
One of the things that's cool is I'd like to ask your thoughts about Marasi, because it's Marasi who uses her cleverness to see that the bands are hidden in plain sight, right? She's the one who realizes, there's different veins of metal in this. And what have we been taught about Marasi since the very first book? She's freaking observant. She sees beyond the obvious. She looks for patterns, and then she decodes those patterns. And so she holds it and she's like, could this be a metal mind? And as soon as she thinks it could be, she realizes it is. And as soon as she realizes it is, she can use it.
Yeah.
That is very good characterization. Because Marasi is what I consider a really strong, powerful, well-rounded female character. Because at no point does Marasi come across as just some butch bloke pretending to be a woman, which sometimes strong female characters can. But she is able to be effective in fights in a realistic way. Like she doesn't like have a fist fight with Wayne and win, which would just be pointless. But she has an excellent rifle shot, but she is so good at thinking, and she can use that not just in like I'm the guy who wears glasses and sits in the chair and I do stuff on computers, but practical intelligence, which is really, really great. And I think that's why she's the one who discovers the bands, and of course she uses them. Dusty, you finally
Centrism. He's split into two different shards.
It's ruin and preservation.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Dusty, about that? About Marasi at the end, and because
Well,
of course
one, we get to see. It's interesting because there's a lot of parallels, I think, to Kelsier. And when I say parallels, I'm thinking, remember when Kelsier first got the power, and then he relinquished the power?
yeah,
It was very similar in that way because she got, she actually used the power for a little bit.
she did, and she could have kept it. She could have kept it.
Mm-hmm. But she saw that she was not the right one, and plus she saw that there was potential to bring Wax back.
Yeah.
And who better to have the power than Wax anyway? So she
But doesn't that take someone special to recognize that someone else might be better off with the power than you?
Definitely.
Yeah, she definitely knew that it was not for her, and that there was somebody much more well suited to use that power in a good way to help everybody. Because I just think, I wonder if she gained some knowledge, because I think it seemed like Wax had gained some type of knowledge when touching that metal mind, because there must have been some memory stored in there, I'm guessing.
100%.
Yeah, so it seemed like he did come across some knowledge. They didn't go into full depth on what that knowledge was, but maybe she did as well, and maybe there was something in there that told her that Wax would have been the appropriate vessel to use that power to get them out of what they needed to get out of at the moment.
I just think that Marasi has, along with all her other amazing attributes, Marasi is humble. She's more humble than Wayne or Wax, truly humble, in that she doesn't think that she's crap or worthless, but she recognizes in a dispassionate and logical way the value, and she can actually say without embarrassment, Dawnshot is better at using these powers, and he will be better. So I'm going to give it to him, not because I want to necessarily, but because, like you say, it will be better for everyone if he has them. And I think that takes amazing character, like someone of real moral and intellectual power to make that kind of call. And she is awesome to be able to be like, give up the ability to fly, give up the ability to think faster than anything, because that's one of the things. Remember, it has in this bracer, it has everything. So she's getting speed of thought, she's getting like adium, she's getting the lot. So like, she's not just giving up flight or giving up strength or giving up healing. She is giving up the ability to think incredibly quickly, to be able to access memories possibly beyond number, to be able to access time and heat and age and all these things. It's like Brandon saying, would you give up immortality because someone else would do the world more good with it? And I just think Marasi was one of the only ones clever enough to find it, and one of the only ones humble enough to give it up. And obviously, she doesn't even know if he will use it, but luckily, he realizes enough to tap into it. And once he does, it can heal him. But he only does so because of his conversation with God.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that before, Andrew. What do you think about the conversation with God?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite parts of the book because mainly because it's just such a fascinating concept to me, and it ties into the broader Cosmere and the connection between Era 1 and Era 2. And I like the fact that the reason that Harmony / Sazed is sending Wax on this mission is that he's not an omnipotent god. He can't control basically this power behind like an evil rival power to his own power on Skadrial.
It's so clever. And like, yeah, it's just interesting. Like the way that this final showdown goes down, where the betrayal is in a room full of traps, and then Wayne and Wax and Edwarn all go down traps to get out, and then Edwarn like drops the entire roof on him, so he's like bleeding out and dying, and of course does die. And their cognitive realm is all mist. I love that. I'd like forgotten that was the case. And I like the way that like Harmony comes to see all of the people who die, just like Preservation used to. And like how he tries to call Harmony on his crap, or like how he sees it from a mortal perspective. Like he talks to him like one man talks to another, right? He doesn't speak to him as if he's a deity. He talks to him like I would talk to you. And so it's interesting that that things go that way. One of the things that's interesting is he sees the red haze, and you've put down, Renegade Shard in your name, like realizing that Harmony has threats that he's dealing with. It's not just you, Wax. And then the thing where Wax brings up Leslie, which absolutely is vital that he do, because all the fandom are thinking if he hadn't brought up Leslie, it would have been an outrage.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
He calls him on it, and Harmony talks to him, and he doesn't really justify himself. But what he does is he allows Wax to realize that the person Wax is most angry with is himself. He's angry with himself.
That's a very nice mask.
You're clearly one of the Southern Skadrians, Dusty.
Yeah.
But that point of actually the person I'm truly furious with is myself, and then he sees that there's this like spark, and so then Harmony gives Wax the choice of like, do you want freedom from pain and from suffering, like go on, or do you want to go back and have adventure? And you know what it reminds me of? Morpheus.
For sure.
One of these pills will give you peace of mind. One of them will be your destiny and achieving everything you're meant to be. And we see from Cypher in the Matrix movie, he just wants the oblivious. He'd rather be oblivious. Just let me be oblivious. And and then but Neo makes the other choice and says, no, I'm going to take the hard road. And of course that's what Wax does. He picks adventure, goes back, but he also finds out that Leslie asked Harmony to look after him when she came to her death, when she was free of the problem of only having one spike. And then he just pushes the boulder off him and he's like, oh, I can freaking do everything. And then we get to see him just be like Superman for like the next part. So anyway, Dusty, what are your thoughts, if any, on the climax? Because I know you didn't get a say.
Well, that climax is definitely something. I knew as soon as he got that power, it was over. There was nothing really that they could do to stop him. But I think just him coming back to life, to me, was the climax. I had totally thought that he died. And that was really upsetting when it happened the first time I read the book. And
I don't know. I didn't totally buy it because, like, we've seen fake out deaths before, and yes, he has I assumed that he had main character syndrome.
Well, yes, but the thing is that in Era 1, we saw characters die and meet God, and they didn't come back.
True.
I totally expected him to die. Because every time that happened in Era 1, I was holding back hope that God would allow them to go back into the fray. And no, they're dead. They're not going back. Like, you saw how difficult of a time Kelsier had. Like, he couldn't go back. So I was thinking, okay, Wax is totally dead. What the hell is going to happen next? But as soon as Marcy saved him, I was like, okay, it seems like at this point on, the heroes have basically won. I didn't see anything coming in their way at that point, and nothing came into their way at that point. So, yeah, I loved what he did, but then again, it's not so awesome when the power is so mismatched. Like, there was nothing anybody could do against Wax. He's like a total powerhouse.
Agreed.
So, yeah, the moment where he came back to life, to me, that was the climax of the story. That in particular.
The thing that I think is very good is, like, as you say, once he's got the power, it's game over. So it's, for me, the actual resolution arc is everything that leads up to that. It's Marasi being clever enough to find it. It's the fact that she was humble enough to give it up, and it's Wax choosing to come back. Once that's done, the game is done. I just want to
that's a good point. Like the being overpowered part. I hadn't even realized that because I just thought it was so awesome when he was superpowered. But that's true. There's not really any conflict after that because he's like Superman powered.
He is. But actually, there is one interesting thing, is that Suit is a leecher. And so when he crashes into Suit nicks all his powers, or he drains it anyway of his reserves. And he's like, aha, I got ya. And it's just one little cool thing, which is a callback to the prologue. And he's like, you forgot something. I'm also a terraceman. And like increases his weight like a bajillion and just smashes through the floor. Oh, that was delightful. Because it was just a lovely parallel with that start of the book, of the fact that his uncles always wanted him to forget his terrace side. And obviously that worked with his sister, and it didn't with Wax. And that's like a nice thing there. We didn't mention Steris. Steris has more to do in this book than in any of the other books. But at one point, she rates herself, everyone's usefulness, as a number.
Yeah.
Wax is like super high. Wayne's pretty high. Even Marasi's pretty high, but she's super low. And she gave herself like a 1, I think. And she's like, I don't feel it's fair to do a minus number because I'm not actively harming the expedition. And like the reader's heart breaks for her, right? But she's technically not being hyperbolic. Like some people, if they said that, would be saying it so that everyone would go, oh no, you're great. And that isn't why Steris is saying it. She's saying it because she actually believes that to be the case. But one of the cool things is we see her preparation help again and again. She comes up with extra vials for Wax. She looks after things. And then at the end, when Alec is dying from the cold, guess who stowed a couple of extra heating medallions? And like, I love it when she gives them, she's like, maybe I'm a 2. And you're like, yes, Steris, you are. You've saved someone's life. You are awesome. But
she's like the weapons master or the dungeons master or something like that.
Yeah,
she's like, okay, this is the plan, and this is how we're gonna implement all of this, and then you guys do your thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I know that there's been a yearning for Steris to be able to like do more stuff, but the thing is, Steris does stuff that's in line with her character, does it very, very believably, and I'm so glad Sanderson didn't fall into the trap of deciding to just say, well, she's an Allomancer now, or she's now channeling the Ascendant Warrior. He's just like, no, she's Steris, but she's still going on an arc, and within her capabilities and what she's good at, she is able to make a massive difference and be important to the plot. And I absolutely love that about Steris. I think it's fantastic. I wish more writers would do character development like this. So everyone in this little band of brothers are all useful, but we'll notice that he takes out Milan and she does nothing in the climax because she's so powerful. And Wax is killed because he's so powerful. He wants everyone to have a point in the climax, and they all do. And that is just such a good good situation. So, yep, we see all that. And then I think we want to just touch on the fact that there's some tension as like Wax takes the ship back. And he's like, I want to make sure that everyone sees this ship, so you can't like take it off us and give us the bands. And he's like, nope, I will not give you the bands, which shows you that in some ways Marassi is better than Wax, but also maybe why it had to be Wax. Maybe Marassi would have caved. And
yeah, maybe.
And like they're not necessarily super good. They have nukes, so whoops, maybe be careful. And that balance that we're going to see in book 4. And then lastly, of course, it ends with them getting married. And
finally.
Yeah, but the thing that's so cool about that is it's a direct parallel to the marriage at the beginning. So this time, Wayne isn't trying to stop it because Wayne's learned that like actually Steris is good for Wax, or at least isn't bad for him, and that Wax is doing it himself. And Wax has a word with Wayne. He says, like, butt out, like, this is my choice. I want this woman. And Wayne's like, okay, I just thought you were conning yourself and doing it because you felt your duty was pulling you in. And he shuts Wayne down. He says, no, this is my girl. And Wayne takes it. Wayne accepts it. And then when he marries her, he does it in a really simple way. They just get a priest in and it's done. And what that shows is that for Wax, it isn't the pomp and ceremony and the beautiful dress and the speeches. It's the commitment. It's the, I bind myself to you, you bind yourself to me. And it's the together forever business. And he says specifically that he is not doing it for political reasons. He says, I'm going to ask you to marry me again. And she's like, we've already going to get married. He's like, yeah, but I want to ask you as a woman. I want to be with you for love and companionship. Will you say yes to me on those terms? And she does. And that is just, it's great. It's a great love story. I think it's my favorite Brandon Sanderson love story. And I love the way it parallels what happens at the beginning. And I think it's also very interesting that that's the same chapter where Alec gives Marassi the mask.
True. Yeah.
And one of the things we can think of is that is symbolic, like giving someone a ring. Like, that's how the Malwish treat it. Like, you just did what? And as we see in book 4, their relationship does not disappear. Like, it progresses. And obviously, Alec meant it in an extremely serious and devoted way. And it's nice to see that chapter is all about commitments. And yeah, I think it's interesting because like Steris has been feeling like baggage all the time, and often speaks of herself in a very practical but derogatory way. And Wax starts to say here, no, I'm not putting up with that. You've done your role and you've done it really well. And actually, I don't let anyone talk crap about my wife, including her. And just like, yeah, you go, guy. And I absolutely love Wax. He's one of my favorite heroes in all of Sanderson's work, not because of his powers, but because he's one of the most straight down the line. Let's do things for the reasons. And his are not based on him being stupid. His challenges are based on his moral conflict coming into play with what real life is about. And I think that's
one of the aspects that makes it. That's one of the aspects that makes it, especially the earlier books, fantasy Western, because he's got that strong moral code of like the Western lawman, right?
Yep, honor. Yeah, but you're right. It's more Western lawman honor than knight honor. You know, like we are knights. Yeah. That's more Dalinar and his codes. But absolutely, the Western lawman, the Wyatt Earp, if you will.
Yeah, definitely.
It's cool. Like, I don't really find Westerns particularly engaging, but my goodness, I find this series engaging. And I
love I actually love series like this that kind of have Western vibes, but in different genres more. Like another example I'm thinking of is the Logan movie that Dustin and I talked about. That's basically a Western movie about Wolverine as he's aging and gets pulled back into doing one last job to be a noble hero. And, That's my favorite Western movie, if that qualifies as a Western.
One last time. I'm getting too old for this, bleep. Yeah,
Yep.
that kind of stuff. No, I agree. This is a great book. I can see absolutely why it's your favorite. If I had to pick a favorite, it might be this one. Though, as I said, I find it my favorite for some of the characters, but not for others. I think the plot is very good. It's a little bit long, I think, compared to, like, as I said, I think Alloy of Law is just really tightly done. I think this is one of the best ones, though, for advancement of technology. Like,
Oh yeah, for sure.
the Allomantic grenade, the pendants that anyone can use. Wow, Furukumi and Allomancy that other people can use. This is the book that reintroduces hemalurgy in a real way, because both Suit and Telson, the reason they can spring out powers that they basically pull out of their ass is because they're not pulled out of their ass. They've been using hemalurgy, and he plotted that back in book 1. He's been telling us that's coming. So I thought that's really good. Oh, and
at the end of the audiobook, if you listen to it, Brandon Sanderson talks about the different types of powers a little bit, and he talks about how hemalurgy specifically is the power that he can develop in a lot of interesting ways going forward, because there's so many different types of ways to use investiture for that.
Correct. It more than any of the others, because it doesn't require you to be born with it. Allomancy and Furukumi both require it to be an accident of birth. Hemalurgy can be given to anybody, and now we see in season 4, when we get to that book, that's expanded on even further. And like, as we know, Sazed almost buried it, didn't he? He almost buried hemalurgy, and if it wasn't for Spook, we might never have known.
True. Yeah, that's a good point.
And Marsh. And by the way, we didn't mention this. Last aside, guys, honorable mention, Wayne dressing up as Death to freak out the spy.
That was cool. That was a cool part.
Cool. Like,
yeah.
You know what it reminded me of? Princess Bride, when they come in with Andre the Giant on the wheelbarrow. It's like, you will not be here. And they're all those men just like leg it. And then I love at the end when he goes to Marsh, like, what was Death's accent like? Because she's actually talked to him. I loved that. I'm like, yes, this is great. Wayne has even pretended to be Death himself. Marsh would not approve.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, and that's cool also, because he's kind of doing an impression of Marsh, basically, because Marsh is who they think Death is. So that makes it even more interesting.
It does, and you can just see Kelsier like laughing his head off.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, the very last scene, we go with the Malwish. We go back in time because he has a coin that Hoyd, we think, left him, and then he picks up the coin, and the coin is now he's thinking about things that are metal mines that you wouldn't expect. Realizes the coin is a copper mine, taps into it, and has the memory of the Malwish woman and the man who comes up to her and gives her the medallion. And she sees the scars on his arms, and he goes, "Survive." And we're like,
"Oh yeah,
it wasn't
it's
the Lord."
Such an awesome ending.
Yeah, and then of course in every book since then, Brandon's been like, "Let's drop some Kelsier hints. Let's drop some more Kelsier hints. By the way, let's have some more Kelsier hints." So, yeah, and if you've read,
and then like obviously in book 4. And this connects a lot to Marasi also. Like, we see the Ghost Bloods.
Yeah.
And there are other characters from other planets in the Cosmere, which is awesome.
But this book already was becoming more and more Cosmere aware, wasn't it? Like, this book was really showing, okay, we've talked about Trell. We've now shown the Red Haze. We're starting to be aware that there's stuff going on beyond Skadrial, but it's nothing compared to what book 4 does, which fully pulls back the curtain. But anyway,
I wonder if if Brandon Sanderson starts writing Ghost Bloods books, if that's going to be his like Cosmere equivalent of the Avengers movies.
Well, it seems we know that one of the main tenets of the Ghost Bloods, as set up by their leader, is to defend Skadrial. We know that's one of the key points. So guess what? There's going to be another era of Skadrial coming up. He's
True.
already, and what's he already done? He's already opened up the Cosmere at the end of this series. So
Yep.
in 100 years' time, or whenever that one's set, I'm guessing about 100 years' time or something, they're going to be way more Cosmere aware. We're going to have ships and stuff. Even if it's not spaceships, they're going to be flying planes for certain. It will be slightly different. I'm sure you'll want to keep a sort of steampunky vibe to it. And so you'll want their technology to be not quite earthy, but similar. And I think he said it was going to be like a 60s feel. Like,
yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah.
and so, but what do you bet that trilogy is going to be super Cosmere aware?
Oh, yeah.
And I bet we've got people actually coming from other planets, maybe even openly as world hoppers.
That
Like,
could totally happen. Yeah.
it could. And he's already said that his 4 pillars are Elantris, Skadrial, Roshar, and Nalthus. And so
Which
the
one's
thing is,
Malthus?
the Warbreaker planet,
Oh, okay.
because of Nightblood, really. But
Right.
also, if you see what Trell did, lots of that seems to be awakening, right?
Mhm.
So, anyway,
Yeah.
but
I bet the back half of Stormlight Archive in
will
particular
also
too
be
is going to be way more
extremely-
Cosmere aware too.
But we know, for example, that that the 4th season is going to be the real Avengers Endgame.
Definitely.
So I think
You mean like
do
you mean like Mistborn Era 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah, definitely.
that's going to be set after Roshar Part 2.
Oh,
So
yeah. Okay.
chronologically. So Roshar parts, all 10 books of Roshar will be done. And then a couple of 100 years later, that's going to kick in because it's space age. And
I
we
wonder
know
if
is-
Era 4 will like chronologically, like you said, take place after the end of Stormlight Archive,
Yes.
but be published before the end of Stormlight Archive because those books are so long.
I don't think so.
No?
No way. Sorry,
Okay.
in my head, no way, because he will do. He's already finished the first half of Stormlight. It's already done, pretty much.
Mhm.
So then he will have a gap. Then he'll do his. He's got to go back and do Nightblood. He's got to do Elantris 2, and then he's going to do Mistborn Era 3. While all of
Mhm.
that's going on, he'll take breaks from that with Stormlight books.
Mhm.
So
Or the other way around, depending on how you look at it.
However, what I'm saying is he'll interchange those like 6 books with
Yeah.
the 5 Stormlight books, and then I think he will cap it with the. It also depends on if we get a Taldane book, so that's like White Sand, because he did say that he intended to do one based on Darkside, like a Chris origin book. We also know that a Silverlight novella needs to happen, and we also know we need Dragonsteel, Hoyd's origin story, The Liar of Partinel. And so
which one is Silverlight?
Silverlight is the city that exists only in the cognitive realm.
Oh, okay.
So it's not on a planet. So everyone in Silverlight is super Cosmere aware. And
Right.
like when he talks about scholars that are in world, he often says, "Oh, Silverlight scholars think this," when they're studying investiture. So what I'm saying is that gives us a lot of books, and while those books are happening, I think Roshar Set 2 will be interspersed. Also, from a purely economic point of view, Roshar is his biggest seller. So
even more than Mistborn?
maybe not in numbers, but because the Rosharan books are bigger, it is his magnum opus.
For sure. Yeah.
I think it's what he is most known for. When you hear his fans talk, they're like, "Yeah, do this other stuff, but when are you getting back to Roshar?" And so I think he's gonna want to make sure that series gets his prime interest. But he doesn't want to get bored on it or burnt out because then he doesn't do his best work. That's what he said. So
right.
I think we will see it all take place. I think the final thing that is written, the absolute last thing when he stops the whole Cosmere, will be Mistborn Series 4. Let me
Okay.
ask you this, as a non-book chat, but a meta chat. Brandon Sanderson has said that he kind of has the books he's going to write pretty much pegged. Like, there's a little bit of flexibility. Like, will I do a Taldane novel? Will I do a Threnody novel? Maybe. You know, we'll see. Will Mistborn Era 3 be 3 books or 4 books? You know, there's that kind of thing. But he said, I've pretty much got my series. When he finishes, will he finish? Will he say, right, I finished Mistborn Era 4. That is the end of the Cosmere. I'm done. I'm going to write other stuff now. Or will it just become too impossible to ever really bring an end to it? Because he could write books in this universe forever.
I think it's definitely way more likely to be option 2. Like, it depends on how old he is by the time he finishes all of those books, but we know that he's an extremely prolific writer. So I think that if he does finish and he's not like 90 years old or something like that, then I think he almost definitely will probably continue writing more of the Cosmere.
It's interesting.
What do you think?
I have, that was always my answer, but now that I think about some of the things that I've seen with people, like with some of my other favorite franchises like Marvel and Star Wars, there are some stories that are suffering with bloat.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And even though he's not very critical, I think Brandon is looking at that going, you should have finished that and then let it be finished. And so I'm wondering if he's
at least he's still writing books that are not in the Cosmere. I think that's good too, either way.
But you notice that things like that, he is quick to dual write or even pawn off. Like Jancy Patterson is pretty much taking Skyward after the 4. He's going to do the 4 books, and then it's pretty clear he's going to leave most of that with her. And she's going to do the spin-offs from there. Like he's turning into, I've got the books I deliberately write, but I'm also a business owner of like a minor publishing franchise or something. And like
we're gonna build out my Cosmere's aka MCU with new authors.
Yeah, and
he's doing that with I forget his name, but that other guy who does podcasts with him sometimes is going to be writing Cosmere novels. He said, right?
Well, yeah, because Dan Wells has actually been hired as deputy of narrative, vice president narrative, but also Dan Wells is doing Dark One with him, which is also non-Cosmere. But he also did a thing with Mary Robinette, another friend of his, called The Original.
Right.
So one of the things that Brandon is doing is he's trying to be an author of the modern age, right? He has audio originals. He has graphic novels. He has standard novels that are incredibly long. He also has novellas that are quite short. Well, not short for novels, long for novellas, because it's Brandon. And he's shown that he's willing to play in a lot of different areas, and we don't know what the future is going to bring for books. What if people start doing, like, if he gets into TV shows, which seems inevitable at this point with what we've heard and his sheer popularity, I think he's like pretty much the biggest fantasy author that has no adaptations.
Yeah, probably.
So, like, I think that's actually a fact. And so the thing is, if stuff like Arcane comes along for him, like, he's not going to be saying no to that.
Oh yeah.
And then how much of his time will that take, though? Because he's going to want to in some way protect his legacy, and he said that like he's okay with it departing from canon and being a different thing, but he wants a very good product if he's going to let other people play in his garden.
Yeah, so, I think if he does that, he could manage it, though, because he's so good at that already. He could devote some time to that sort of stuff, because I know he doesn't want to like micromanage, but still have definitely a lot of creative input. Yeah, in like a Mistborn or a Stormlight adaptation, and he could spend some time on that and still write his own novels, but take longer for them to come out, and then that if he already has other people writing novels that take place within the Cosmere, that can be another thing that helps out with that too.
Yeah, I'm just saying that we're already seeing it, right? He's already devoting at least one of his days a week purely to expansion media. So because we know that there is a deal, he hasn't announced what it is, but we know it is already existing and active with people who are being paid and things that are being created. And we're going to find out more about that, I'm sure, when people are ready to unveil trailers and what have you. But clearly that's taking an increasing amount of his time. Like, he's gone off Writing Excuses. I don't know if you know what Writing Excuses is. Writing Excuses is a podcast that he launched years and years and years ago, and he has officially left it as one of the producers and
Oh,
the
okay.
team.
Yeah, I've heard him talk about it before. I think I might have seen one episode, but that's all of it that I've seen.
It's mainly a podcast, but I've been listening to it for years. And the point is, he loved that podcast. But the point is that he's saying, I literally can't anymore. I'm now an incredibly wealthy, incredibly busy CEO. I'm no longer just an author. And when you see all the stuff about Dragonsteel, you can see that he one of the reasons he's been successful is not just because he's a great writer, it's because he's a great businessman.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And like, he realizes that his capacity is out there the more people he brings on. And you can see the people he surrounded himself with, he's chosen them carefully. And there's huge implications for his writing in that, but also the more people that get involved and become based on his income. Like, what if you finish the Cosmere and you're like, there's like 60 people's jobs that rely on me.
Yeah.
Or if he's running a movie franchise by then, not running, but integral to. If you think about the amount of people employed by Marvel, we could be talking hundreds of people whose jobs are reliant, and they're going, give us more Cosmere. Give us more Cosmere. Like, I can't see Brandon going, suck it, I'm done. He's going to be saying, well, okay, I'm not going to mess with my main story, but you can have this other story from the past of Taldane, or this story of, like, Cosmere stories could easily be continued to be set just like comic books, right? You don't have to change the core line of the plot to do that. So I could totally see him being sucked in like that. But I think his intention is to end it. But I can totally see him. But I can totally see him not being able to.
Wow, I'm surprised that like, I would be surprised that he's intending on ending it. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, if he wants to write other stuff too, I'm sure he could do really well at other books too. If he did want to end the Cosmere and start writing totally new stuff that has nothing to do with the Cosmere, he could totally do that.
Well, think about Jim Butcher, right? Jim Butcher has different series that are entirely separate.
For sure.
And he finishes a series that's really good. Here's another series. And like, obviously one of his series, the Dresden Files, has been so successful, it's gone on and on and on and on and on. But if he finished the Dresden Files, like, I think he could totally just come up with something new. And
totally. Yeah,
like,
as you were saying that. There, I just recently read his Codex Alera series, which is totally different from Dresden Files. It's still fantasy, but it's a totally different type of fantasy. It's high fantasy, high epic fantasy, and Dresden Files is like contemporary, quote unquote, low or sort of urban fantasy or whatever. And he could totally do that for sure too.
Anyway, but I think knowing when you're done is one of the things that helps a thing have an amazing legacy. And I think that goes for lots of things, like even stuff like, I don't know, Star Trek The Next Generation, right? I worry, or like even the original series, like those things, stopped, and that's one of the reasons they're still rewatched.
Right.
I really enjoyed shows like Supernatural, but it has like 8 seasons too many. And
the same sort of thing happened with The Walking Dead. People seem to almost universally agree with that I've talked to, that it started off really, really awesome, and then it dragged on and on and on forever and got worse and worse.
Same with like some other disturbances of like The 100. The 100 was a really cool idea, but the first couple of seasons explored that idea, and then I'm like, right, now we're done, and they weren't done. And I was like, oh,
Okay.
well, now I'm done. I'm done with this story and with these actors. And so that's problem. As one of the reasons that Stranger Things, even though it's been ridiculously popular, is saying the next season is our last season. We might do a spin-off or something, but we are going to finish this story with 5 seasons because we know that if we go on and on, we're going to lose this reputation we have for being freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite series of all time is an incomplete one season, which is Firefly.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if Firefly had been allowed to run for 5 seasons, if it would still be as beloved and as high quality. Anyway, that's my thoughts. But I just thought I would ask that meta question because we are getting to the end of an era, and Brandon Sanderson is more popular than he's ever been. His first secret novel has come out this year and has been a runaway success. People have read it and said it's their favorite novel he's ever written. So it's he has a very bright future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well said, man. All right. Well, we've been talking for a while, as
Yeah.
often happens, because we get so excited about what we're discussing. So I think we can end it here. So thanks for talking with me, man. This was fun as always, and thanks a lot to Dusty too. And yeah, so I think for the next one, I think for the next time we talk, we should discuss the Heroes, that second Joe Abercrombie standalone. I know you read that one relatively recently, right?
I did.
Yeah. All right. And I'm sure we'll double check with Dusty, but I'm sure he's probably cool with that too. So yeah, check out that one next time, everyone. Thanks for watching. Let us know your thoughts about Mistborn if you read these books. Hopefully you've read, like we gave all sorts of spoilers for this books in here, so hopefully you have read them if you've watched this. And yeah, it's an awesome fantasy series, and you should totally read it if you haven't. And yeah, his broader Cosmere is awesome to explore as well. And yeah, so like I always say, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click that like button, click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos, and check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description as always. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and grooves in the heart. And Mistborn and Brandon Sanderson and the Cosmere are awesome, and it's fun to explore. All right, anything else you want to say before we end it there, Tristram?
Yep. Thanks for having me on, man. Always.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. And until next time, and adios until next time, everyone.